The Hong Kong Federation of Trade Unions held a march from Southorn Playground in Wan Chai to the central government offices this morning.
We urge the government as soon as possible to fulfill the promises, to cancel the mechanism of offset of mechanism of the MPF, and secondly, to legislate the standard working hours.
Some of those taking part in the event put on costumes and masks to illustrate the problems they are facing. At the forefront of the march were members of the Hong Kong Professional Tourist Guides General Union. They're upset that some travel agencies in Hong Kong hire illegal workers.
Using no license as a tourist guide. That's why we don't like this one. Because we study, we have our education stuff then.
People in the construction industry also spoke out.
We would like to ensure the site safety so that every worker can work on site in a safe manner.
In the afternoon, the Confederation of Trade Unions held another march from Victoria Park to the central government offices. The group stressed the importance of a work-life balance and suggested a standardized 8-hour workday. They also urged Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying to live up to his election promises.
We have an economy that is a first world economy, but our labor law is a third world level of labor law. We believe that the government had the responsibility to legislate. You know, CY Lam have promised that they will legislate on the working hours, and they will legislate on the abolishing the offset provision of the MPF and severance payment. But all these, CY Lam have failed the workers in Hong Kong.
Foreign domestic helper groups also joined today's rally. They called on the government to improve working conditions for domestic helpers. Among their demands, they want the government to increase the minimum wage for foreign domestic helpers. We are not slaves! The foreign domestic helpers also want the removal of the mandatory live-in requirement and the introduction of standard working hours for them. After arriving at the central government offices, the protesters submitted a petition to government representatives. Ronnie Samtani, TVB News.
President Xi Jinping has demanded decisive actions against terrorism following last night's attack at a railway station in Urumqi, the capital of the restive region of Xinjiang. Assailants used explosives and knives in the attack, leaving 3 dead and 79 injured. Reports say 2 of the dead were attackers. As Jenny Lam reports, the violence came just hours after the president wrapped up a 4-day visit to the area.
Authorities in Urumqi stepped up security at the train station after the attack. According to the official Xinhua news agency, there were at least 2 explosions just after 7 p.m. yesterday. A train had just arrived from Chengdu before the explosions went off at the passengers' exit on the south side of the station. Assailants armed with knives then slashed at passengers. Calling this a premeditated terrorist attack, the state media made no mention of the number of assailants or whether the authorities have arrested any suspect. Xinhua quoted eyewitnesses as saying that the explosions went off amid some luggage placed between the station exit and a bus stop. The force of the blast was so large that some people were knocked over. Traffic in the area came under tight control after the attack. President Xi Jinping just wrapped up a 4-day visit to Xinjiang earlier yesterday. He stressed that there is no room for complacency in the fight against terrorism. He said decisive actions must be taken to suppress the terrorists' actions. Authorities have tightened security at train stations around the country following the Urumqi attack. Armed police officers now patrol stations in Guangzhou, Shanghai and Chengdu. Jenny Lam, TVB News.
Police in Northern Ireland have arrested Sinn Féin leader Gerry Adams as part of an investigation into one of the province's most controversial murders. Adams led the political wing of the Irish Republican Army, but later reinvented himself as a Northern Ireland peacemaker and then as a populist opposition politician in the Assembly. The 65-year-old Adams was questioned by police in connection with the death of Jean McConville in 1972. The outlawed Irish Republican Army believed at the time the 38-year-old woman was a British spy. Police have long suspected Adams of being a member of the IRA and that he ordered McConville's murder. Adams denies any connection to the killing, and he's always denied being a member of the IRA. If he's charged with murder, it could deal a damaging shock to Northern Ireland's precariously balanced peace.
Ukraine has detained Russia's military attaché in Kiev on suspicion of spying and ordered him to leave the country. This as the government wrestles with a pro-Russian armed uprising in the east that Ukraine accuses Moscow of orchestrating. Alan Buchnia reports.
The Ukrainian Foreign Ministry said the unnamed diplomat was detained after undertaking intelligence activities. It said his actions were not in accordance with his diplomatic status and he would have to leave Ukraine. Two of the country's key eastern provinces are under the control of pro-Russian separatists, well-organized gunmen dressed in unmarked military fatigues. Russia denies orchestrating the uprising, but has warned it will intervene to protect ethnic Russians. Acting Ukrainian President Alexander Turchinov conceded that his police and security forces are incapable of reasserting control in the region. Meanwhile, acting Prime Minister Arseny Yatsenyuk announced that an agreement had been reached to hold three-way talks between Ukraine, Russia, and the European Union on the ongoing gas dispute. Russia has almost doubled gas prices since the toppling of pro-Russian President Viktor Yanukovych in February. Yatsenyuk also discussed the upcoming election scheduled for May 25th. He said it's no longer just about electing a new president, but responding to questions of unity, territorial integrity, and the decentralization of authority. The Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe says it plans to scale up its operation in Ukraine in advance of the elections to ensure they're free, fair, and safe. But the group is still trying to negotiate the release of 7 of its international observers detained since last week by pro-Russian separatists in the eastern city of Sloviansk. Without getting into detail, an OSCE spokesman said he was hopeful a solution could be found. In a bit of good news for Ukraine, the International Monetary Fund officially approved a $17 billion bailout for the country. IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde, however, stipulated that the assistance is hinged on economic reform. That includes raising taxes, freezing the minimum wage, and raising energy prices, something that will hit many households hard. Alan Buchnia, TVB News.
A botched execution in Oklahoma sparks outrage among human rights groups that are now calling for an end to the death penalty in the United States. Witnesses say the prisoner died a long and horrible death after the lethal injection went awry. Lethal injection is the practice of giving a fatal dose of drugs to punish those found guilty in the U.S. of committing heinous crimes. It consists of a 3-drug concoction. One to put inmates to sleep so they feel no pain before the 2 other drugs stop their breathing and then their heart. But that's not what happened to convicted murderer and rapist Clayton Lockett. Witnesses to his execution say his sedation drug failed. Long after the breath and heart-stopping drugs were administered, a wide-awake Clayton uttered the following words.
Something is wrong. And then another something that he uttered, we believed he said, "Mama, turn it off."
It took 40 minutes for Lockett to die in what resulted as a heart attack. Lockett was convicted of raping and murdering an 11-month-old girl. He also shot a teenage girl and watched as accomplices buried her alive. This is why the governor of Oklahoma responded by alluding an eye for an eye.
I believe the legal process worked. I believe the death penalty is an appropriate response and punishment to those who commit heinous crimes.
But she did halt further executions until an investigation determines if state protocols were not followed. Prison officials insist Lockett's ruptured vein blocked the sedative. But angry human rights advocates call it state-sanctioned torture and urge the U.S. to abolish the death penalty altogether.
This not only amounts to cruel and unusual punishment under the U.S. Constitution, but it could easily amount to torture under international law.
While President Barack Obama believes the death penalty doesn't deter crime, in rare cases it's appropriate when carried out properly.
That even when the death penalty is justified, it must be carried out humanely. And I think everyone would recognize that this case fell short of that standard.
Human rights advocates hope the long list of botched executions will encourage Americans to urge lawmakers to do away with the death penalty. Bacteria resistant to antibiotics have now spread to every part of the world and might lead to a future where minor infections could easily kill people. That from the World Health Organization, which found very high rates of drug-resistant E. coli bacteria, which causes problems including meningitis and infections of the skin, blood, and the kidneys. Because it has also found worrying rates of resistance in other bacteria, biologists are warning we could see a return to the era before antibiotics.
So the two main danger actually is the use and overuse of antibiotics in food factory and in animals production, and the second one is the overuse in human health. Taking into account that most of the time people take antibiotics because they have a common cold and because the patients want to have an antibiotics.
And still ahead on the news tonight, ancient wells found at a railway worksite in Kai Tak. Calls for better public transport arrangements for the Kai Tak cruise terminal, and Atletico Madrid to meet Real Madrid in the Champions League final.
It's been a season they'll never forget. When a familiar bell rings,
your ex-wife is here.
They'll open the door.
You are letting your ex-wife stay with you.
What was I supposed to do? To a whole new relationship.
You're not the man that I thought I knew.
Tonight, Castle at 10:35 on Pearl.
Why this watch? This watch has seen gale force winds, incredible sights, and craft and crew become one. It's marked the most challenging seas, the longest nights, and charted a course for the bravest of brave. It doesn't just tell time, it tells history.
The outstanding achievements and contributions of distinguished marketers deserves to be recognized. Since 2005, HKMA TVB Awards for Marketing Excellence has been presenting individual awards to honor distinguished marketers and bestow prestige and recognition upon them. The time has come for you to acknowledge the marketing elite in your company.
The HKMA TVB Awards for Marketing Excellence
is open for entry now. Give us your support.
HKMA TVB Awards for Marketing Excellence 2014 is open for nomination now.
Slim 唔一定日日做 gym， 仲要識享受生活，呢個就係法式瘦身哲學。
法國 On Nobile Top Slim 含天然綠茶精華及瓜拿納萃取物，幫你輕鬆消脂，全身 Slim Up， 展現法式完美體態。
Enjoy life, enjoy beauty. Top Slim. Nobile.
Welcome back to TVB News. 6 ancient wells have been discovered at the MTR's Sha Tin to Central Link construction site in Kai Tak. While one of them is being preserved and the fate of a second one is still pending, the other 4 have been destroyed to make way for the rail project. As Jenny Lam reports, conservationists are calling on the government to intervene and stop the construction works.
Some of the wells, ceramics and other relics found at the Kai Tak site date back to the Sung dynasty more than 7 centuries ago. A square-shaped and relatively complete well is preserved at its original site. The fate of a second well has yet to be decided. The other 4, or round-shaped wells, were believed to be not as old as the square ones. The MTR Corporation, after discussions with the Antiquities and Monuments Office, made a record of the round-shaped wells. The contractors were then given the go-ahead to destroy the wells to make way for the rail project. Conservationists say destroying this piece of history does not comply with international standards. standards. Albert Lai of Professional Commons accuses the government of failing to consult its own antiquities experts. He is worried that what's left of the wells will be ruined if construction works at the site continue. He has urged the government to come up with a conservation plan. Jenny Lam, TVB News.
And also at Kai Tak, businesses at the cruise terminal have called on the government to boost public transportation to the facility to help attract more customers during the slow summer season. As Vicky Kung reports, the terminal's operator is planning events to boost its appeal as a place to visit and hang out in Hong Kong.
About 2,000 tourists, mainly from Japan and Australia, disembarked this morning at the Kai Tak cruise terminal for a one-day tour of Hong Kong. These travelers explained why they enjoy cruises.
It's very comfortable. You have enough time in the cruise, and you won't feel very tired.
Lots of events in the cruise, so very fun. And with baby, so very easy.
Just to see a different side of Hong Kong, to see a different sailing in is beautiful, and see all the tall buildings, and yeah, it's lovely. We're going to plan to do a spa, a massage, maybe take a little lunch, just relax.
But with the typhoon season approaching, the next ship won't berth until September. The terminal's operator said it will host exhibitions to attract more visitors during that slow period. Other efforts are also being made to develop the 5,600 square meter commercial area at the terminal. About 87% of the commercial units are now rented out, with restaurants, duty-free and souvenir shops expected to open over the summer. Managing director of the terminal operator Jeff Bunt says compared to a year ago, it's easier to find renters now because the terminal receives more bookings from cruise lines. But the lack of public transportation to the place remains a concern, especially to shopkeepers looking to attract customers during the slow summer season. At the moment, there's only one minibus route running between Kowloon Bay and the terminal. The operator has urged the government to add temporary ferry routes between the terminal and Central, making it easier for people wanting to get there. The government says it will assess the situation before deciding whether to boost transportation links. Vicky Kung, TVB News.
Demonstrators march in Tsim Sha Tsui today to protest against the large number of mainland tourists here in Hong Kong. It comes at the start of the Golden Week holiday, during which a large number of mainland visitors are expected. Stephanie Choi reports.
Waving communist flags and dressed in mock People's Liberation Army uniforms, members of the satirical Love China Hong Kong marched down Canton Road, calling on mainland tourists to liberate Canton Road and to boycott foreign goods. The protesters behind me are telling mainland tourists to go back to their homelands and to buy goods that are made in China. Some shops selling luxury goods had to close during the protest. Around 30 members of a pro-government group countered the anti-mainland protesters by encouraging onlookers to love both mainland China and Hong Kong as one nation. Mainland tourists who witnessed the demonstration said they should not be turned away from Hong Kong. We help boost your incomes by shopping here, said this woman. This man suggested it was simply a matter of supply and demand, referring to the shortage of infant formula, which some say is caused by mainland shoppers. Earlier today, another group of ralliers launched what they called the first ever competition for photo submissions of mainland tourists urinating in public. A local citizen and a mainland tourist accused them of discriminatory behavior. But the ralliers insisted that they were only upholding Hong Kong law by discouraging public urination. Stephanie Choi, TV News.
The Center for Health Protection has warned travelers to the Middle East against coming into contact with camels. Camels are among the animals that are known to carry the virus responsible for Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS. Jenny Lam reports.
More than 300 cases of the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome have so far been reported around the world. World Health Organization figures show that the SARS-like disease has surged since March. More than 50 cases were reported last month. The death rate associated with MERS is as high as 35%, and some carriers of the virus may not show any symptoms. Leung Ting Hong, controller of the Center for Health Protection in Hong Kong, says travellers to the Middle East should avoid coming into contact with animals. He has urged travel agencies to stop organising camel rides because the animal is known to carry the coronavirus responsible for MERS. Secretary for Food and Health, Ko Wing-man, said today there were 2 recent cases of MERS that had spread from the Middle East to Southeast Asia. He said Hong Kong needs to step up its vigilance against the disease. Executive Director of the Travel Industry Council, Joseph Tung, said camel rides are popular with visitors to the Middle East, but given the risk of MERS, many member agencies of the Council have now switched to horse riding instead. Jenny Lam, TVB News.
All right, Tony, what do you have for us on this fine holiday?
We have football to start off with and an all-Madrid final in the Champions League. Well, Chelsea were bowled over on home turf last night as Atletico Madrid proved too good for the Blues in the Champions League semi-finals. The result sets up a final clash between Atletico and local rivals Real Madrid. It's the end of the road for Chelsea, who saw their Champions League hopes go up in smoke against Atletico Madrid at Stamford Bridge last night. Former Atletico player Fernando Torres put the Blues ahead in the 36th minute, but Adrian Lopez levelled just before half-time. A Diego Costa penalty in the second half gave Atletico the lead before Arda Turan sealed a 3-1 victory in the 72nd. The reward is a date with local rivals Real in the final, and Chelsea boss Jose Mourinho admitted the 2 Madrid teams have consistently been the best in the Champions League this season.
Probably yes. I didn't see every game, I didn't analyze every team, but probably yes. Real did a good group phase and was in trouble in Dortmund, but after that with Bayern had complete control of the situation. Atletico arrives to the final without one single defeat. I think I'm right. They didn't lose one game. So I have to say probably yes.
For the second night in a row, it was party time in the Spanish capital as Atletico fans poured onto the streets to celebrate the famous victory. Not only are Atletico poised to win Spain's La Liga for the first time since 1996, a triumph over Real in the Champions League final in Lisbon on May 24th would secure their first European Cup. On to basketball now, and the San Antonio Spurs have regained the edge in their NBA playoff series against Texan rivals, the Dallas Mavericks. The San Antonio led throughout in beating Dallas 109-103, led by Tony Parker, who played despite the early morning birth of his first child. Parker scored 23 points while Manu Ginobili had 19 points. Afterwards, San Antonio's head coach paid tribute to Parker for staying focused while the biggest moment in his life was happening away from court.
I think his child is a little bit more important in the game, but he managed to do them both. He was magnificent for us.
And last but certainly not least, the famous United Buddy Bear exhibit made its way to the shores of Rio de Janeiro for the 2014 World Cup in Brazil. The painted bears represent 141 different countries and stand side by side to symbolize a vision for world peace. The exhibit started in Berlin back in 2002 and has traveled the world over with stops in 28 countries on 5 continents since then. The charity that runs the exhibit says more than 30 million people have seen the bears, and it's raised more than $2.8 million for UNICEF and for local children's relief organizations. And that's our news.
Thanks for watching. Good night.